This is Wonka. He is our very special boy. He also has cancer, specifically lymphoblastic or large cell lymphoma of his stomach, and this is his treatment diary. So I'd better start with what is lymphoma. It's a nasty cancer of a specific type of white blood cell, the lymphocyte, also called lymphosarcoma and sometimes abbreviated to LSA. There are different types of lymphocytes, like B cells and T cells, and they can all become cancerous. It can develop in any organ, including the brain, and it spreads rapidly around the body. All of its types are bad. Surgery is very rarely an option, unless you get very lucky with an intestinal lymphoma. It's either chemo, palliative care, or euthanasia. Wonka's illness began with him suddenly vomiting one day. This is unusual for him, but because he is a garbage guts and eats anything, including stealing things out of the bin, I assumed it was a case of dietary indiscretion, as his appetite was perfectly fine. But he continued to vomit for a few days, despite fasting, despite a bland diet, so I put him on antacids and he seemed to get better. His blood test at the time was perfectly normal. Then the vomiting returned when the medication finished, and I started to wonder if it was something else. He had more antacids, a prescription diet, and at the time it still didn't respond. I thought he might have had pancreatitis or triaditis, but I thought about the worst possible thing it could be, and so I got him an ultrasound. And it was pretty close to the worst possible thing it could be. Ultrasound machines do not see through air, and air gets trapped under the fur, which is why his belly had to be shaved. The ultrasound discovered that most of his stomach was thickened. Normal cat stomachs are between 2 and 4 millimeters thickness, and his was closer to 15 millimeters thick. And the advantage of ultrasound is that it provides an opportunity to collect a fine needle aspirate of anything suspicious, which we did, and that confirmed the lymphoblastic lymphoma. Lymphoblastic means that as far as lymphocytes go, this cancer arose from the baby lymphocytes. It's typically more aggressive than the lymphocytic or the mature cell type ones. Many people would not choose chemotherapy for their pet for various reasons, including personal experience. But Wonka is only 10 and a half, which for me is just too young. So I chose to go to a veterinary oncologist with him. Yeah, the vet sought a second opinion. Chemotherapy success is measured in survival times. We don't talk about cures as such in vet medicine because we're not trying to cure our dog or cat patients of cancer for 30 years or more. They were never going to live that long anyway. So we just talk about survival times, and those vary depending on how you look at the data. The survival times for lymphoma as the whole group aren't that great, but it can occur in any organ, and the location changes the prognosis quite a lot. For lymphomas of the gut, about 50% respond to chemotherapy, 30% survive for 1 year, and 25% survive for 2 years. The initial response is a better predictor of survival times than whether the cancer is a B cell, T cell, in the bone marrow, or any other classifications or staging that you might use in other species. So I didn't actually bother with further testing, instead channeling my funds into treatment. Chemo is expensive, even for a vet. And if Wonka goes through the whole 6 months, we will probably spend about $7,500. Wonka was vomiting up to 7 times a day before chemo. He was lethargic, clingy, and not really grooming. Trashbag had also stopped grooming him, so whether that was TB's choice or Wonka's, though I don't know. He looked like he was aging rapidly, and his weight had dropped down to 4.3 kilos, when usually he was around 4.8. His blood test was still perfectly fine, despite the lymphoma identified in the majority of his stomach and at least 2 epigastric lymph nodes. We already knew it had spread. You always consider lymphoma to have already spread. Blood tests are often normal with lymphoma, by the way. There's no specific blood test for cancer. Sometimes the calcium will go high, but that's not a reliable indicator of being cancer-free if you don't see it. Now, chemotherapy has a justifiable reputation as being quite harsh. It is. It's trying to kill cells in the body that are very nearly normal, and because of their closeness to normal cells, collateral damage happens. So we carefully considered the pros and cons for Wonka. He was a previously solid cat with no other health issues. A plus. He came from a region of Tasmania where toxoplasma was common, and his toxoplasma status was unknown, which could be an issue. The main side effects seen with cats on chemotherapy is a loss of appetite, and Wonka could eat for the Olympics. At 10.5 years old, that was too young for me to accept fate. I hope for all of my cats to approach 20 years old. So we went ahead with chemotherapy on the understanding that if he wasn't responding by 2 months, or roughly week 9 of treatment, or if the side effects were too severe, then we would switch to palliative, and that would be that. I might detail his protocol in a future video, but he started on vincristine on the 24th of September, and then he did not vomit at all for 4 days. Previously, he'd been vomiting between 4 and 7 times a day. On the 1st of October, he had a cyclophosphamide tablet and then didn't vomit for 10 days. About 3 days after that medication, he was off his food and only wanted to be fed hand-cooked chicken, but that lasted about 6 hours before he decided cat food was okay again. On the 13th of October, he had his second chemo appointment and third overall dose, and it was discovered that he had gained 300 grams. His blood tests were all still normal. Now, gaining weight on chemotherapy is quite an achievement, and I'm actually really proud of him. And it's enough for me to dare to be hopeful at this stage. But those first 2 months will tell us how we're really doing. If I can, I will try and keep you all abreast every week or every other week of how we're doing, and I will try to answer any questions you've got in the comments below. And I really wanted to thank all of those people that left really nice and encouraging comments on the previous video. You've really made my day. So thank you very much for your kind support, and I will see you next time. And so will Wonka.